Okay, so recently I was at Google I/O Connect China, and I got the chance to sit down with Aja Hammerly. So Aja is the developer relations head for Firebase Studio. We not only talked about Firebase Studio, we talked about the whole direction of AI coding, perhaps where some things are going, how people can get started, how it's all sort of changing as well. So I encourage you to watch the video. It's very interesting. She's got a lot of interesting things to say. And then chime in also with your feedback on the topics that we talked about and some of the questions that I asked her. I'd love to hear other people's sort of thoughts on these things as well. Enjoy the interview. Hi, everyone. I'm in Shanghai at the IO Connect China. And today I'm being joined by Aja Hammerly, who is the developer head of Firebase Studio. Did I get that right?
Developer relations head.
Okay, developer relations head. All right. So what we're going to do is just talk a little bit about sort of AI development for coding, and also sort of some things about Firebase Studio. I'm curious, how did you get here?
How did I get here?
So you've got an interesting story yourself of
Yeah.
Getting involved with coding in AI.
Yeah, so I'll admit, I'll own it. I was skeptical. My initial experiences were not good.
Right.
Some of that's on me. And so I fought it for quite a while. And then I had an aha moment, and I got an opportunity to come join the Firebase Studio team when we were first getting started. And the vision of creating an environment where you could use AI as much or as little as you wanted. You could support whatever workflow you wanted, whether that was AI enabled or, completely no AI, and it all lived together in one environment. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And then I started playing with the product, and we got it in first earliest builds that we got access to internally. And I was like, wow. And I made some just amazing things with, one-shot prompts. I did a demo I did it next was a Go game.
Right.
The prompt was, or it was IO. The prompt was literally Go. And then I'm like, game. 2 words, and it created a Go tutor with, AI assisted help and, evaluated my moves. And I'm like, okay, this is real now. And then I started integrating it into some of the other stuff I'm doing, using a less one prompt technique, but more of an interactive coding buddy technique, working on building agents, working on building, trying out ADK and looking at A to A and all of that stuff. And in my role, I have to switch languages a lot. I try new frameworks a lot. And
Right.
It's so helpful that any workflow I choose to be using, any language I choose to be using, I can ask those questions. I can be as dumb as I need to be, and it'll catch me up. And it also saves me a ton of time on boilerplate. And that's the other thing. It's I don't have to remember exact syntax for defining methods in the 12 languages that I may touch in, a given year. I got there. It took a while. And so for the folks out there who are still skeptical, you gotta try it again.
So I think you brought up a really interesting point, right? I see a lot of comments where people tell me when I'm trying out Gemini or something that coding is not one-shot prompting.
It shouldn't be for a lot of stuff.
I've never said
Yeah.
this thing. How do you sort of think? What's your take on that these tools like Firebase Studio really are not made for one-shot prompting? Like people think that, but actually they are this sort of back and throw kind of chat.
Yeah, so I always think of the AI. So before Google, a long time ago, I worked in a 100% pairing shop where we showed up every morning. Someone from the team was our pair for the day. We sat at one computer together, 2 keyboards, and we wrote all of our code together.
Right.
And I may be one of the few people in the world who loved it and misses it greatly. And so for AI, for me, is my pair. And so nothing we ever did there was, one person wrote all the code and the other person just sat, went and grabbed a coffee and came back, right? That was not how it worked. And so that's not how I approach working with any of the AI tools, Firebase Studio, Gemini CLI, any of them. It's a discussion. It's a collaboration between me and the AI. And yes, the one-shot prompt demos are so much fun. But even that one I did on stage at I/O, it wasn't done. It wasn't ready for production.
Right.
It needed tests. We needed to iterate on it. We needed to potentially clean up the UI, make it, I didn't choose different colors. There's all sorts of things to do. And anytime I'm building something bigger, it ends up being, a multi-step discussion. And I literally approach it the same way I would approach working with a human pairing partner. I describe the problem. we want to solve, maybe ask a couple questions about different options for architectures before a single line of code is written. And then we start iterating through adding the features one by one. And, Gemini writes some, I'll correct some code, or I'll say, hey, I don't like how you did that. Can you do this differently? and we go back and forth.
Do you approach it as if you're sort of coming up with a PRD from the start, or like how detailed are those discussions? I'm kind of curious.
Depends on the problem size.
Right.
So if I've got something relatively big, yeah, write the PRD and input that as part of the initial prompt.
Right.
Like, yeah. It also depends on how well something's defined. If something's more exploratory, because I do a lot of stuff, I'm like, do that.
Try it out.
Try it out. And like a lot of the stuff prompts I give are not actually about generating code. It's like, can you explain why you made that decision? Or what are other options there? Because it's about building something together.
Right.
And it isn't about me telling my code robot to go write all the code for me. It's about collaboratively creating with this resource, this AI that is very skilled at some things, and I am very skilled at some things, and together we make awesome stuff. And so sometimes PRD, sometimes random question to figure out if something's even possible.
That sounds really interesting, right? And I think that sort of dismisses the whole idea of all these one-shot, demos and stuff. One of the things that I love about Firebase Studio is that it's not just writing the code for sort of doing it locally. You can actually deploy it, and it can actually set everything up, right?
That's my favorite part.
I know, because that's the bit that it's about the most frustrating for most people.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the interesting things is that we're seeing this growing audience of builders, creators, application designers, experience creators. Haven't decided the name for that growing audience yet. They're really cool and they're building amazing stuff. But as soon as you go to the deployment step, especially if you're doing a cloud deployment, even more if you're trying to set up your own server, there's a lot of really fiddly bits. And I worked on cloud for a long time. I've carried a page. I've been an SRE-ish. And there's just a lot of fiddly bits.
Yeah.
And so the fact that for the most common stuff, and you can work with the AI, and there's going to be places where the AI is going to need you to go do some stuff. It can't do everything for you yet. When I had to go set up OAuth, it walked me through how to do it, but I had to do it myself.
Great.
The fact that it can walk you through that stuff, it can do as much as it can for you, and for the vast majority of things people create, it can just play. That unlocks all of this for so many people because they don't have to think about things like firewall rules necessarily. They can, but we help them down the path of success, and I really like that.
So you put out things like firewalls and things like that, right? For me, I would refer to this new group of people as makers, right? Just for a simple sort of thing. I sort of see that a lot of makers, they don't even know what a firewall is, right? They don't even know what half these things, actually are. So the thing I'm kind of curious about is, okay, you're clearly a high-level, coder, programmer. You know what you're doing, right? How do you actually design something so that it can work with people of your level, but it can also then, be able to be used by a maker who is coming totally fresh at this stuff? And I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this on my own team. Yeah. I have one of the people on my team. She's worked with me for about 15, 16 years. She's never touched code. She's not a coder. She does design. She does other things. And all of a sudden, she's giving me these prototypes that she's building with these tools like Firebase Studio.
Yeah.
How do you design for that?
So here's first secret.
Okay.
So actually, let me go the other order. So first thing is the way Firebase Studio is designed is that we have a prototype-based experience that you don't see code or you don't see much code. You see the prototype, you give feedback on it, you can circle stuff, you can, highlight stuff, you can upload images, and you work back and forth, but it is largely insulated from the code. Is our application building experience, and that's for the makers. Secret is also for the traditional developers, and that's the thing I think a lot of folks don't realize is that a lot of traditional developers, they will use that to get started, and then they will dive into the code. And that's the thing I love the most about the product we built, and one of the things I'm most proud of is that you can go from that, very interactive, very UI-based, very interaction-based experience, and then you can go into a full IDE, web-based, so you have everything's in the web, so you can access it from any device, and you can go into the code, and you can work with the AI in the code, and you can say, hey, I don't like how you did that, or have a disagreement about variable names with the AI. You do you. And if at any point if you started in the AI first experience, you can go back, and people do. I do. A lot of folks on our team do. A lot of folks I've talked to do is they'll start I am not a front-end dev, and I will own that, and I am exceptionally respectful of all the front-end devs out there because it is real hard. I've tried, and I'm just not that human. So I use it to help me prototype the front-end stuff, to give me enough there that there's pieces, and then I can go into the CSS and the JavaScript and edit stuff and make it look my own. But I do that in the prototype. I do that in the AI first experience. And so the fact that you can switch back and forth, that you can choose to use AI, and then we also, and I have projects I've pulled in, I don't use any AI into Firebase Studio.
Right.
I just import something from GitHub and just code. There are languages where I still feel faster doing it myself than ones I know really well. That will change.
Is that also because there are different kinds of projects? Like,
There are different kinds of projects, or there are projects where, like an existing project where I know the code really, really well,
right,
and like
okay.
I'm deeply emotionally invested in it, like my blog. Although I
Okay.
have started using AI to help me manage the website that hosts my blog, and it's fine. And that's the thing, is that we give you the options, and that's what I feel very passionate about, is that people need options, and that it isn't about the person. Because like a pro code person, a person who's a professional developer and, has been coding for 7,000 years, they can use AI.
Yeah.
And someone who's learning coding through these AI tools can also jump into the code and highlight sentences and ask questions, and it's all for everyone. And that's the piece that I think we try to divide the world into, like, you use AI but you don't code, and you use code but you don't AI, and it's a lot squishier than that.
So I imagine you can, you've got a good sense of how people are using this. Is there a sort of percentage breakdown of how?
Oh no, I don't.
this,
I don't have a good sense. I have
okay.
I have a good sense from talking to folks, but I also know that I can't talk to all of our users.
Yes.
They're everywhere,
Oh,
right?
right.
The thing is, because it varies so much person to person and project to project, even within a person,
Right.
that like I couldn't put percentages on that. It's a good question though.
It's interesting to kind of look at and then just sort of think. Like, I know for me, I'm also not a front end. I can relate to you totally there. I was so grateful when I first found Tailwind, and
It's amazing. Yeah.
That was like, oh, and now it seems to me that, like, okay, even things like that, I kind of feel like, okay, clearly models are much better at that, at doing it. But even like, I probably don't appreciate it as much anymore because the model can do it, for me. Whereas before I used to love the fact that, okay, I could kind of work CSS out with Tailwind.
Yeah. Well, and then the interesting thing is that you and I feel that way, but I've had the same conversation the other way with someone who is an extremely good interaction designer, really loves the front end, but finds the back end piece completely tedious.
Right.
And so they're like, oh no, I spent all my time manually moving the front end stuff around and like being very passionate about that. And I just told the AI to go make me a database. And I'm like, cool. And that's why I can't give breakdowns, because the tool has gotten to the point where you can adapt it to your workflow, or that it can work with you in your workflow, no matter what dev workflow you have. And that's the cool part. And I think that's when it got that good, that I can switch my workflow depending on the project and what I was working on. I'm like, oh, I get it now. Also, I got better at prompting, and that helped too.
So that's a great point. Yeah. Like, maybe we should talk about that. Like, this is one of the things I find with the people who complain about it. When you see their prompts, they're sucky prompts. They're like, there's no real direction for the model. They're very vague, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What do you think developers should be doing to get better at prompting?
So I can tell you what I did.
Right.
Which is I found people I worked with who were better at it, and I asked to see their prompts. I asked to see what they're doing. Like, those early stages of testing, someone on the team showed me something. I'm like, I have no idea how you built that. Can you show me?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, why did you ask this? Why did you ask the question in this way? And they're like, well, I specified these technologies, and I specified that the end goal should look like this, and I iterated on this bit. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. The other thing is I then just spent a bunch of time, and you don't even need to do coding prompts, I found. I actually just spent a bunch of time with Gemini.google.com having it solve like logic problems and stuff, and just working with it and figuring out through experimentation, because that's how I learn. Right. Some people can go read books. Some people would go watch YouTube videos. I just spent a lot of time doing it wrong. And not a ton, a couple hours, maybe, a dozen over the course of a week, and you start iterating on it. Some general trends that I've noticed, developers, especially those with a lot of experience like myself, get very attached to the how. And you will frequently have a better time with AI if you step back slightly from how it goes about solving a problem
Right.
and focus on what you want the end result to look like. And, we've talked about that. The other thing is, if you have strong opinions about the technologies that it should use, be real clear about that. If you're like, I really want you to use a database, say that.
Right.
And also call it out. The last thing that I've actually given folks a couple hints on recently is like anything, important to checkpoint your work.
Right.
If you're working with AI, make sure you're taking regular checkpoints when you get to places where things are working, where you're moving in the right direction. Same thing I would do when I was coding with a pair. We would check in every 20, 30 minutes, rarely more than a couple hours,
Right.
into a branch. If you end up going down the wrong path, you can come back. You can reset the context window and, trash the conversation so you lose some of the most recent context that is not in the right direction. Move back to your checkpoint and start again. Firebase Studio has that built in. Every request has a checkpoint attached to it in the AI first mode. But you can do that in any tool.
Right.
And if you use auto agent mode in Firebase Studio, it also checkpoints every single request. So you can easily roll back.
So for people who haven't seen it, perhaps you explain what auto agent mode is.
Auto agent mode. So we actually had, I've heard from a couple folks that they watch non-coding friends, partners, parents, children use some of these tools, and they like ask the thing to build something, and then it tells them a bunch about code, and they just hit apply over and over again without actually reading it because they can't read the code. Auto agent mode skips having to hit apply. There's a handful of requests that we still need a human to validate, but for the most part, it will lay out its plan, and then it will just start making the changes. And it's great. I will say that it took me a while to be able to get there. And the fact that
it takes some trust.
It takes some trust, but it also, like I mentioned earlier, it took me getting a little divorced from the journey.
Okay.
And one of my coworkers talks about it as, working with someone you're mentoring or something like that. And I remember working with an intern a long time ago, 15 years ago now, more than that probably. And I gave them a task, and I walked away. And I came back, and they had achieved the task, and they had gone about it in a completely different way than I would have done it. And it wasn't wrong, it was just different. And so sometimes I call back to those experiences, or, I know people with kids, they ask their kid to do something, and their kid goes about it completely different way than they would have done it. But, the floor gets swept.
Yeah.
Maybe not as efficiently, but it does get swept. And so I just have to remind myself, sometimes working with the AI's journey is maybe different than the one I would have expected, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means it's different, as long as we get where we're going. So
what do you feel about, like, one of the criticisms a lot of people say is like, oh, the code is just not, not maintainable code, not, these are the kind of things that I see people writing comments and stuff like that when I've shown off some of these features.
As I said, I treat the AI as a pair.
Okay.
And so I am definitely of the school that every line of code needs at least two sets of eyes. Everywhere I've worked as a dev, haven't been a dev at Google. I've been in dev all my whole time, but everywhere I worked as a SWE before that, we had code review rules. Every line of code is written by one person and code reviewed by another. And it helps if you do things in small hunks to do that. And that's how I treat the AI. I review the code if I'm taking something, I'm going to publish something to share. If it's not just, for me and, a couple of my friends, it gets code reviewed. There's a question about whether you can have AI code review its own code. It's an interesting conversation. But for me, at least, every line of code has to be looked at. And that would be true whether it was someone else writing it, a human, or the AI. Every line of code gets looked at twice.
In your prompts, do you actually ask it to sort of comment its code and explain stuff?
I ask it to write tests.
Right.
I'm a big fan of test-driven development and really strong automated testing.
Okay.
I've actually asked it to do TDD, asked it to write the test first before. That worked. It was interesting. I'm not sure I would do it again.
Why? Why do you say that?
The whole point of TDD for me is to help characterize the problem, define the space of the problem, and I'm having to do that in the prompt already.
Okay.
So I don't see a ton of advantage when I'm doing AI, heavily AI-driven coding or heavy AI-assisted coding more accurately. But you can do it, and I'm not the only one I know who's done it. So, I think.
So what about things like adding in tools, MCPs, all this sort of stuff?
That is the thing right now.
Yeah.
So I've personally seen the benefit of adding in tools, adding in MCP, adding in additional ways to provide much more specific context. Because the models are so big and so general and so powerful that helping narrow it is super helpful. I've seen that. I've played with that in some of our templates. You can install MCP servers into Firebase Studio. We rolled that out about a month and a half ago, I think now. Dates are getting fuzzy.
You guys have been shipping quite a lot.
The community tells us stuff they want and we try to build it. And we're still in preview. And so we're iterating on a regular basis, taking a lot of feedback from the community. And they've been great at giving us good feedback and actionable feedback. Are
they particular sort of MCPs for coding? And obviously there are MCPs for doing things with agents and things like that.
So there's MCPs for handling, there's MCPs for working with like the places you deploy.
Right.
There's Firebase MCP, which is fantastic. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. I know a lot of MCPs for languages or frameworks.
Right.
Like we announced announced the Dart one this morning.
Yeah.
All of those are the ones that I use because that grounds my model, which is already very good at coding, in my space. You can also do that with, really creative prompting or, providing it positive and negative examples, standard prompting techniques. But I actually really like the MCP. And MCP plus a good AI rules file is a really good combination.
So what's in your AI rules file?
Depends on the language. So like if I'm working on my blog, which is Ruby, Jekyll, Ruby and JavaScript, I've got a handful of Ruby files. I have Ruby is an opinionated language, but there are a handful of accepted styles, at least historically. So I have like my style rules are in my AI rules file. Some information about Jekyll, how Jekyll projects are structured are in there so that it can help me. Some stylistic things that I like in my particular setup. Like I use specific commands to compile that aren't the base ones. I've customized them. All of that's in there. The fact that I deploy to Firebase is in there so that it knows that I deploy that way. I don't deploy to other possible outcomes. There's some stuff about the JavaScript styles I use, but I don't write a lot of the JavaScript. So
do you have like CSS stuff in there?
I don't, but that's because I don't tend to go edit my CSS stuff.
Okay.
Most of what I'm doing is adding like new pages and new collections and stuff. If I'm doing Flutter stuff, I'm going to use our Flutter template, which has a Flutter-specific set of AI rules. One of the things I do, I don't know if anyone else does, is I go find other people's AI rules files, and then I take them and I modify them.
I think a lot of people...
Sometimes with Gemini.
Okay. Getting it to actually go out and find...
Or getting it to find them, or like I'll ask it to give me an example, or I'll say, hey, here are two AI rules files. Like here's a JavaScript one, here's a Ruby one. Here's some stuff about Jekyll. Make me one that merges these together in a logical way. And then MCP servers, it's going to depend on the project, what I pull in. The documentation ones are interesting. They solve a very interesting problem on how you ground a model that's only trained occasionally. That's with how fast models are being released now. It's going to be interesting. This world is moving so fast.
So, going off that, where do you think the coding stuff is going? So we're seeing like a lot of these CLI tools. We've got Claude Code, we've got Gemini CLI, which is
people love them.
Do you see people using that with Firebase Studio? And then you've got like VS Code tools.
So people ask me to predict the future all the time, and I am all out of ability to predict the future. But I can tell you what I'm seeing that I'm excited about.
Okay.
And I can tell you what I'm hoping happens.
Right.
And like those are I don't have some magical like oracle that I can go consult to figure out where we're going. So one of the things I'm seeing that I really like is that there are a lot of different ways to access this technology.
Okay.
Like I personally use Studio. I really like it. I worked on it. This is not a shock. Some of my friends worked on Gemini CLI and they love that and that fits their workflow. And cool. I don't want to use the CLI for that stuff, but I've always been kind of a give me a beautiful UI and UX type of person most of the time. But like, those are both valid ways to access it. Those are both valid ways to build stuff. If there are particular models that people like, there are particular tools. Some people want to do stuff that's mostly front end, or they want to do stuff that's mostly visual. Other folks want to be able to describe it in words. Some folks want to do it with language out loud. Okay. And that's, I think, the cool part of these LLMs, and specifically using them for code, but other creative tasks as well, is that because they're multimodal, because of the way they're designed, they can support different ways to go. So if someone wants to go with, one of the CLI-based tools, awesome. That's cool. Someone wants to go with something a little more UI focused, a little more what you see is what you get, and although we haven't used that term in 20 years,
Yeah.
that's also valid. And those are both ways to interact. And I think that's the thing I like, is the flexibility that we have. Where I see stuff going,
What would you like? You said you would tell us what
so
you like.
one of the things that I would really love folks to understand, and this isn't a me opinion, is that on some level, and I know there are lots of folks who would disagree, on some level, the act of prompting an AI is just another form of code.
Right.
And like, I think about, like, I had to learn assembler in college to get my CS degree. I did some C. I'm a horrific C programmer. We did Java. And then I moved into the Rubies and the JavaScript of the world when I actually started programming professionally. And that is going further and further up a stack. And like, you look at Python and it's kind of Englishy. Like, it's not English, but like, it's much more Englishy than like assembler. And so I see a lot of how I think about writing prompts as this is just another programming language. Looks a lot more like natural language. It's a lot more accessible. But like, Python was a lot more accessible than C. And so one of the things I'm seeing more folks approach it that way. They're approaching this as just another tool that we can use to build experiences. And I love that. Seeing a lot more folks work collaboratively with the AI. I'm seeing a lot more folks use the AI to reduce toil. I don't know about you or the folks watching. There's a lot of things that I've had to do that I really was not, they took a lot of time, and I was error prone, things like that. And if the AI can help with some of that stuff, great. I'm also really excited as I see folks having discussions with the AI about architecture options, or building agents with AI and talking through different ways to build agents and using the AI to hook together MCPs with an agent framework and stuff to build things that make their lives better. And like, the thing I get most excited about is just what people are building now.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, where's this going? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. I want to see what you made. Because like, some of the stuff that the team came up with, some of the stuff that our users have come up with, I'm like, I've never thought of that. Like, I never would have thought of that. And it's so cool seeing the stuff that non-traditional coders are coming up with. I'm like, that is so cool.
Yeah, I find that often they're the ones that come up with the most interesting ideas, because they would never think about it like we would think about coding it. They just think about the end result.
Well, and they can also, in a lot of cases, I'm seeing things from people with deep domain expertise.
Yes.
Bringing that deep domain expertise and going, I've always wanted a thing that did this, but I could never, dedicate the time, find the resources to build a dev team to build this. And, it might be a very specialized app for a very small group of people. But like, they can bring their deep domain expertise in medicine, in law, in education, in any field, entertainment, sports, to this.
Do you see the future as being a lot of apps being just for one user, like one user apps?
Oh,
like where people sort of create an app that just they want, right? Like for work or for things like that.
I have no idea.
Right.
I do think there's going to be a lot of stuff that people have that has multiple users, because humans like sharing.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess what I meant is like for if you've got some real special use case, and I also see this with people with real domain expertise. Apart from them, there's very few people who are going to want this in the world. But now they can actually make it, and for them, it helps them so much.
But programmers already did that.
Right.
We already did that for
For
ourselves.
ourselves, yes.
Like, I remember one piece of advice I got early in my career is, if you have to do something 3 times, automate it.
Yes.
And so the fact that other people can do that now, awesome. Would I consider the stuff that I've automated programs or apps? Me?
In some...
So sometimes it's just, a script that I hacked together. And like, I think we're going to see all of that because it's just accessible to more folks now. But like, humans love to share. People are going to build cool stuff and share it with their friends. And they're going to build cool stuff for other people and create businesses around it.
Do you think that like, we talked before about like people learning to prompt and stuff. Do you think that's going to become sort of like part of CS education, part of sort of anyone that's, like, are we seeing like almost like a whole new field of like using these tools?
So I don't know. I can tell you that the folks I know that are college age use these tools.
Okay.
They're not necessarily in CS, but I know that I know some folks who are in school right now, in college right now, university, and they are aware of these tools and they are learning to use them, and they are, sometimes annoyed with them the way the rest of us are, and sometimes, very excited about the things they can enable. I remember when the internet became a thing. I remember when phones became a thing. I remember the first time someone told me I was going to browse the internet on my phone, and I'm like, that's never happening. Yeah, I was wrong about that one. And it changed how we worked with information. It changed how we built things. We had to learn how to work with the technology, but that's the story of technology. Every technology, going back before digital technology, we've learned to work with it and, see how it fits into our lives and makes our lives better. So,
Awesome. I think that's a great note to finish up on.
Okay.
All right. Some great predictions there. All right. Thank you for this. It's really fascinating to hear your thoughts of where things are going. Thank you for all the great work that you and your team and the other teams, people working on Firebase Studio have done. There's some really cool stuff in demos and stuff like that are coming out all the time. I would ask you, what's coming for Firebase Studio, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to tell us.
What I can tell you and I can tell folks is if they want stuff, go to the forums, firebase.studio is where you can access the product. You can get to the forums from our pages. Give us feedback. Let us know what you want. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. We very much want to make sure that we're building something that works for the users, that we're building something that serves a variety of use cases. And the best way to do that is to hear from people. And we take all of the feedback very seriously. We read it. We include it in the roadmap and stuff. So if people want to have an idea of what's coming next, they can tell us what they want to see next.
And look out for it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Aisha.
Thank you so much.